Hi everyone, before I start this video I want to give a quick shout out to John Heaton. John Heaton makes really wonderful videos. He does a lot of album reviews and I've always enjoyed watching his channel, so check him out. This video is probably a direct response to a new video that John put up, and this has been on my mind for a while, but his new video inspired me to go ahead and make one of my own. It was a review of Bob Dylan's new album, Triplicate, which is a 3-record set of American standards that Bob does, which I always think is a great thing, to step outside your box, particularly in the case of Bob Dylan. He's always been very versatile. He's done all kinds of albums. I mean, we know he had the period where he did Christian albums in the late 70s into the early 80s, and country. You know, he's done all kinds of things, and I don't think that's ever a bad thing. However, I do have a little problem in the sense that I think I'm getting a little tired of this, what you might call fetish of Dylan's lately, with this old standards music and him thinking that he's Bing Crosby or Frank Sinatra. He never will be that. And if you look on my channel, somewhere along the line, I did a review with my nephew on an album called Fallen Angels, which was the last, or the second, in this American Standard series that Bob did. And I enjoyed the album, and I enjoyed that experience very much with my nephew, doing it together with him. However, this is going on and on. I mean, he's already had the 2 albums. The first one was, Shadows in the Night, I think. Is that the right title? Of the first one that had old standards on it of Bob crooning, you know, standing there like Rudy Valley or something. And that was an interesting departure. Then he did the Fallen Angels album second. But this new one, Triplicate, as you can tell by its title, is a 3-record set. And it's all this kind of old standard singing stuff. Now, while I have nothing against Bob dipping his toe in the water, as I call it, and experimenting with various genres, which I think is always a great thing, especially for a great artist like Dylan, who's been around for so many years, since the very early 1960s, it gets a little tiring. And, you know, on John Heaton's video, he did say a few things. I have a couple of little notes here I just want to refer to. He said in his, at the beginning of his review, he said, you know, do we really have a right to expect Bob Dylan to do more original material, you know, even though he's 76. I mean, he's going to be 76 this month. And do we have a right to expect him to do more original material? I never understand that approach, as if, like, you know, we're somehow, I don't know, kind of intruding on him or pressuring him or something as the consumers. The way I look at it is, with any artist, not just Bob Dylan, we are the consumers. We're the audience. He plays for us, really. Well, also, I guess an artist of any integrity does for himself too. You want to do what you want to do. Hopefully, you'll hope that your audience likes it too. Is the best kind of artist. You know, your own desires first come at the beginning. I remember Lindsey Buckingham, I think, saying that about the Tusk album with Fleetwood Mac. People were expecting other rumors, and he wanted to do Tusk. And he was kind of like, well, this is the artist's vision, and if you don't like it, you know, so be it. You'll be disappointed. I think that a lot of times John Lennon of the Beatles, when he was in his solo career, he tended to do that too. He did what he wanted to do. Albums like the Politically Charged, Sometime in New York City, and a lot of fans and critics were kind of stumped by that and didn't like it, but that's what he wanted to put out, his messages. And so I get all that. But, you know, at least in Bob Dylan's case, when he did albums like Slow Train Coming, which I love, it's one of my all-time favorite Bob Dylan albums. It's a born-again Christian album, and it's one of my favorites. When he did that album, and then when he did the album Saved, which was also a Christian album, followed by Shot of Love, the third one, at least back then, they were pretty much, I mean, it was his own material. He was still writing his own songs. I mean, this is not Bob writing old standards. Now, I mean, again, I want to stand corrected here for a moment if I'm wrong, because I mean, I think maybe on these albums that he's released, Are any of them original? I think there might be some original songs on there. I can't swear to that, so I apologize if I'm wrong there. But this whole thing about Bob being 76, how long can we expect him to do this? Do we have any right to expect him to do this? Well, Paul McCartney is going to be 75 next month, and Ringo Starr is going to turn 77 this year. I mean, they're doing original material on their original albums, and of course, it's not just Paul and Ringo. Other people are, Paul Simon, right? I mean, the list goes on. So I think that's kind of like a cop-out to say that he's old. So, you know, this is the kind of music Bob has to do now because he's old. You know, I mean, what else do you expect? I would also say that when you think back to Dylan's earliest stuff from the very, very early 60s, when he was playing in the Village in New York City and stuff, and the little taverns and clubs and things, he was a big fan of Woody Guthrie. I mean, and then we have Leonard Cohen, who went on pretty old to do this stuff. This type of stuff that Bob Dylan is known for, you know, writing poetic lyrics, maybe speaking on behalf of what's going on in politics or around him in the world today, that doesn't ever go out of style because a person's 76. In fact, like I said, people that Bob was weaned on, people who he looked up to, like Woody Guthrie and those types of people, those people were older men to begin with. The very foundation of what Bob Dylan started as comes from older men. I mean, older sound. So if anything, he's kind of growing. It sounds to me like this, getting older and wiser and more world weary and everything like that, and a little more of a geezer, if you will, actually fits his style of music, or at least the earlier style of music when he first came up. You know, back then he was a 20-year-old, 21-year-old singing songs that people in their 70s should have been singing, and he sang like he was 70, right? He sounded like he was more like an old man in the sound of his early voice. Now that he's actually an old man, you start singing old songs by Cole Porter or Irving Berlin and Frank Sinatra. You're not Frank Sinatra. You're not old Blue Eyes. You're Bob Dylan. You're Robert Zimmerman, Zimmy. I mean, what are you doing? So anyway, personally, I say I liked some of the stuff. I mean, I like Melancholy Mood, which was a song that he did. I enjoyed the Fallen Angels album. You know, I think it's great that Bob experimented. They've all done it, right? Even Ringo Starr. I think Ringo was the first pop/rock star that had an album in 1970, Sentimental Journey. He was the first person to do old American standards on record and revisit them. But then he moved on from that. He didn't stick with that. And then you even had Paul McCartney in 2012 did his old standards album, Kisses on the Bottom. But then right after that, he put out a new album of new material. So this baloney about, you know, Dylan, you know, he's getting older, this is more the type of music he should stick with. I don't see it. And I know if you're a Bob Dylan fan out there, you're going to have an opinion. And I really hope this is going to be an interesting discussion, especially if you're a big Bob Dylan diehard. What do you think of this? And I mean, try to look past the fact that you really like him and that he's your favorite. I mean, I would have to question the same. Like, for example, I love the Beatles and I love the 4 solo careers. Now, if Paul McCartney decided he was going to make a couple of old standards albums and not do any more original material, really, and then even put a triplicate album out of 3 as the 3rd release, I mean, eventually I have to ask myself to put my bias aside and my preference for McCartney aside and ask myself as a fan, honestly, do I approve of that? Do I really think that's good? I mean, I know we tend to stick close to our favorites. If you're really heavily into somebody and he's your favorite, and you don't want to go against him or her. So I'm curious to know what the people feel out there. Please leave your comments. Let's discuss this. I just say enough is enough. That ship has sailed. It's getting stale. I mean, it was great for an album or two. Now it's time to move on. The question also is Bob Dylan out of material? Does he feel he's run dry? Does he feel like he can't do it anymore? He can't make anything? He's lazy. I mean, what do you think? Thanks, everybody, for watching.